Welcome to the Disinformation Resilience Network podcast. And I have a special guest today. He's a sinologist. He's an expert for not only China, but also Taiwan. He lived there for several years, as far as I remember, and he also visited China several times. And what I really appreciate that he is digging deep in also not only in the offline world, but also in social media to kind of monitor the Chinese influence operations and how they work. Welcome to our podcast, Mr. Binder.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our talk because I've learned a lot from you, mainly from your online presence on X and regarding misinformation and with regards to Russia and Ukraine. So, yeah, I look forward to it.
Friedrich, you mentioned Russia and Ukraine, which is one of the topics we can discuss even on the beginning right now, because many people think that China is a kind of honest broker or completely neutral in this conflict. On the other hand, we have the BRICS summit coming soon, and we know that China and Russia and many other countries of this anti-Western axis very close allies in the propaganda war against Western democracies. Do you think that China has this constructive role regarding the Russian aggression against Ukraine that many analysts and even political scientists think, or is this an illusion that we should get rid of?
The second part. I think it's an illusion, and the reason why I'm saying that is kind of like in the case with Russia. We just need to listen closely what China says. And also, like Russia, they are pretty transparent about it. Even if they often make conciliatory statements superficially, but if you look at Chinese, I'm going to say propaganda that they put out on state media, a very different picture emerges. And also, if you look at who they invite for interviews on state propaganda, and they invite many of the people that you're probably familiar with in regards to Russian propaganda. So yeah.
What I would like to go deeper into the narratives that the Chinese government, the CCP, basically is disseminating via their state TV, their propaganda TV, their state-controlled media. What kind of messages do they send to their own people?
Well, can we start from the message they sent to the West, and then I'll talk a little bit about how it's different. The message the West is offered from Chinese propaganda is one of China as being very peaceful, and it's presented in the way it has always been peaceful. It has a very long history, and they also like to present themselves as having like a sort of a special cultural Chinese identity, which makes them interested in harmony and basically cooperation above all else, and which is not true. Like any state actor, they are mainly self-interested, which makes sense. Now to the second point. If you look at Chinese social media, one has to know that everything we see on Chinese social networks has basically passed the censorship control. So that's what they want people to see, even if it's not produced by the state itself, but by, yeah, let's say Chinese nationalists. It's still, the state doesn't have a problem showing video clips of Chinese planes destroying all of Taiwan with sort of a heroic background. And if you contrast that with the message that they're mostly interested, what they're interested in mostly is a peaceful reunification, as they call it. It's not a reunification because Taiwan has never been under PRC rule. But their message is also, we want a peaceful reunification. But they have no problem of having these ultra-nationalists run wild on Chinese social media.
I recently saw on Instagram there was one post about, I think it was loosely connected to Taiwan, and there was somebody who at least claimed to be Chinese from mainland China, and he told a Taiwanese lady that soon we will recapture what belongs to us by military force, and then you're gonna be destroyed. So very aggressive messaging. Even despite the fact that Instagram is should be at least blocked in China, but we know that the propagandists and the trolls, they go outside and they are able to leave. I mean, the government even wants that, and they use these proxy companies. Also, it's very similar to the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, the Prigozhin project. I would like to know, you told me a couple of new infos about the recent very aggressive propaganda against Taiwan, which is on a new level. Can you give us some insights and examples?
I wouldn't say it's on a new level because it comes and goes in waves. Like for example, now every time there's an election in Taiwan, China ramps up its aggressive stance. A change I have seen is that people in Taiwan, people I know at least, are more worried now than they have been in the past. I've seen a poll recently, and it asked about how are you very worried about the prospect of a war with China? And the people who indicated that they were very worried was something like 60%, which is still much less than we in the West think. Most of us, at least those who know about the tensions, probably think most Taiwanese people worry all the time. But they don't, because they cannot afford to worry all the time, because they, yeah. But there's an increase of worry, and that's, yeah.
You mentioned people that Western people and influential Western people, and I would say they are academics, they are former diplomats, they have a kind of I would say, I mean, influencer in the German-speaking world. When we say influencer, we think about social media, but I mean, it old school influencers as well, who have some kind of reputation in education or some other field. And these people are invited to write for Chinese state media, and they write their articles there. What kind of people are they, and what messages do they deliver, and why are they invited?
Good questions. Okay, one, there are, I hate to say it, but there are German sinologists, old school Maoists. Like there's a generation where, yeah, a certain generation of German sinology has an, let's say, a Maoism problem, which is not addressed properly. And there are some very famous German sinologists yeah, who were invited by the Chinese state to Xinjiang, the Uyghur region, and they're about to publish a book about their travels, or so-called travels, and they had an opinion piece in the, I think, the NZZ, Neue Zürcher Zeitung, and yeah, it amounts to, in my opinion, what they wrote amounts to, if not
Whitewash.
outright genocide denial, at least whitewashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, it seems like we have very similar messages coming up. We have the great China culture. We have the economic power China, which it is without any doubt. But
Yeah.
it's a question if you think that this is something we should obey to, or what we should praise, or something we should realize in an analytical way. And then you have more aggressive narratives, which I also see on social media. For instance, the Western media is lying to you about China. You hear that all the time. And I think this is also very interesting because it serves almost all of the BRICS countries, because they have this common message. Yeah, Iran, Russia, they all have the message, don't trust Western media. Um,
Yeah.
and we have so many of these clubs and associations, and China friendship and China business friendship clubs and NGOs. Do you think that it's these subversive activities in Europe, that they work without any kind of resistance at the moment?
I obviously don't know all of them, but generally, I'm afraid they do, mostly, because as you just said, you have the obvious propaganda on social media, which I haven't made up my mind how worried one should be about that kind of propaganda. Because, for example, if you look at Chinese state TV, CGTN, they have their own YouTube channel with, I think, 3 million followers, but there's almost zero engagement on their propaganda videos. So nobody watches these,
This is
to
why
be
they're
honest.
using
I mean, you
Western
have
influencers, yeah, because the Western influencers, they have a huge reach when they go
they have
to
a much bigger
China.
reach, but they have a much bigger reach. The Western influencers have a much bigger reach on their own channels, because luckily the Chinese state is not very good at doing propaganda. It's it's kind of ridiculous. Like if you watch the YouTube videos they put out, it's not very good.
Yeah,
But the Western influencers are much better at it, obviously, because they know how to talk to a Western audience. But as you said, they are very, very in your face and very obvious.
yeah,
And
there's a media called Chinesische Volkszeitung, yeah, so Chinese People's paper or whatever, Gazeta, and it was ridiculous, yeah, the way they communicated the slogans. I'm reading it since many years. Their headlines. On the other hand, this is quite obvious and maybe not so dangerous because it's ridiculous. But on the other hand, when it's about subversion, when it's about all these agents of influence or useful idiots that propagate the great China and this cultural thing, and they have a very strong cultural diplomacy, of course, because it's a huge country with a huge history indeed, and the economic power. These are things that they work well, it seems, and there are a lot of people who see China as not only a global player but also a productive and honest player. So,
uh,
how, are the Westerners, the Western collaborators of Chinese propaganda, the reason that they are so successful?
Yeah, I would agree, and I'm much more worried about about offline influence, to be honest. Like good old influence campaigns through language schools, restaurants, Chinese medicine practitioners, dragon boat clubs, that kind of stuff. And to be honest,
Tell our viewers
German
what
politicians.
dragon boat clubs are.
There's a specific one in like China has a tradition of doing dragon boat races. It's a sport. It's connected to the Mid Autumn Festival. It's a thing. It's really cool. Boats look nice, and yeah, it's gotten kind of popular in the West a bit. I would say it's a good thing overall, but yeah, there's a big festival in Frankfurt in Germany every year, and they have a dragon boat race. There's a club which is was founded really quickly and by overseas Chinese, and yeah, that club had obvious connections to the Chinese government, which for I'd say most sinologists would be obvious from the start.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'd say to many people, it just looks like a friendly club which offers cultural exchanges, a bridge between Germany and China. Yeah, and mostly harmless, but it isn't.
When you mention something like this, I mean, I heard recently a young political, not activist, political organizer of a talk, of a panel discussion. He invited one sinologist, which I think has very questionable views. And then this young guy answered to me, and I was very surprised about his statement. He said, well, isn't every sinologist a little bit pro-China? And that raised the question, because we had it also with, for instance, so-called Eastern Europe experts, which are actually Russia experts and see everything through the lens, to the Russian lens, and they are so Moscow centered that they see all the other countries as a kind of pawn of the West, or pawn, or proxies, or only objects, not subjects.
Yeah.
I think that we have the same problem with Taiwan, or also the situation in Asia as general, that we see only China and not all the other countries that have security interests, because the Philippines and Vietnam. Do we have the same danger here, especially as Europeans, where we are also ignorant as more far away something gets?
Yeah, definitely. So I regarding China, I think um, I'm not quite sure what a China expert is.
Mm.
uh, except for I mean, obviously we need more people who are able to speak and read and write Chinese. But I think what we need more of in this discussion is experts on authoritarian regimes in general. I don't think there's, and many people like to make a special case for China, which often comes in the form, it's so big, it's so different, it's so old, and yeah, basically we need extra tools to understand it, because it's so different from everywhere else. And that's what the Chinese state also likes to say, like, you don't understand China. But I think like everybody who knows authoritarian regimes in maybe in post-socialist or still socialist states has the tools to recognize what China does. So yeah, and for that reason, I think it's very easy for the Chinese state to counter any critique, because they can always say, well, you don't understand. We have this huge population, which you don't have. We have Confucianism, which you don't understand. We have Chinese democracy, which they go so far as to say, which is real democracy, which you don't have. Yeah. And basically that's even how many propagandists, foreign propagandists, try to shut down any conversation. But you just need to take a look at Taiwan, which to a certain degree, obviously, has a Chinese cultural background, at least the Han population of Taiwan, and nobody is denying it. They are, if you will, they are a Confucian country. They have Taoism, Buddhism, folk religion, but they are doing very well with democracy. Much better than many Western democracies, to be honest. So yeah, the argument that democracy is somehow not suited to Chinese people, yeah, look at Taiwan.
It would be actually a quite racist idea that it doesn't work.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, the Chinese propaganda is, for instance, framing even Taiwanese people and Hong Kong people who do not want to subjugate to China. They are framing them as racist, so it can get very absurd.
Yeah.
As you told me during our last talk, we're talking about Chinese people, yeah, who are just not willing to be ruled by Beijing and the CCP. And they're, yeah, well, I mean, what I find interesting is
yeah, who are just, I have to say this because I don't want to get anyone angry. Like, yeah, I prefer to say it's like Taiwanese people, I don't know how to say it best. They historically carry a bit of Chinese cultural baggage. So that's, yeah, but I don't want to, because more and more people in Taiwan like are forging a stronger and stronger identity, which is separate from China. And they're saying, no, we have our own history and we see us at Taiwanese first. Well, they're not denying that there's cultural overlap with China.
yeah, and
But,
the origins before the 20th century, you know. So
yes,
yeah,
yes.
but this is I find it interesting that the Western enablers of these pro-Chinese movements, and when I look, for instance, what is happening on Instagram, or what I can see there on TikTok, where they show you they make these false allegations of what supposedly Western propaganda says about China. And recently there was this video about the West tells you that we have in China so many homeless people. No, this is not a propaganda narrative, or not anything that people say about China, or that the houses look ugly in China, and then they show these perfect buildings. You recently told me that they have their favorite spots that they film all the time. Of course, not the poorer districts and regions. And I find it so funny because nobody I know who criticizes China speaks about buildings there, speaks about that they don't have nice neighborhoods and impressive water parks and so on, and roller coasters and everything. They speak about the situation of the Uyghurs. They speak about the threats against China, against the Republic of China, against Taiwan. They speak about the human rights situation, the more and more authoritarian system of the CCP. They speak about the alliance of China and Russia and the BRICS and the propaganda and a million things more. They speak about the executions and all this stuff. They don't speak about houses, and they absolutely don't speak about the food, because they have fantastic food, of course. Yeah. So this is all these kinds. They play a game like they debunk propaganda, which was never made, which was only created by them. Yeah? I could say the same.
Yeah.
We see the same with the Russian supermarkets. I never expected it because of the sanctions that the Russian supermarkets are empty. Of course, some products are not there. I know they have wonderful supermarkets and they have good food there. They have many things I would love to have here, but it's a dictatorship. They are attacking Ukraine. They are spreading authoritarian vibes all around the world, the Wagner Group. So there's a million crimes. This is the things that concern me, not the way the supermarkets look like, and nobody speaks about that. So this is a strategy, and I'm afraid that people who don't care about politics a lot and who are not well informed, that they will resonate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very old propaganda trick, but yeah, it works. I mean, I've had friends tell me or ask me, have you heard about this amazing city in China? And I've stopped them right there because I knew exactly which clips they had seen on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, because it's always the same, and it comes in waves.
Which city is it?
Chongqing. And they show there's a train that passes through a residential building or two. That's
Yeah, I
in
saw it.
every single.
Not
You saw it?
again. The commuter. I saw it
Yeah.
several times, but yesterday I saw it the last time. Every time it pops up, yeah, the commuter, and
And then they show
he
Hong
shows.
Yadong.
And this is so funny because sorry to interrupt, but
No
I
problem.
just remembered the clip. And he said, "Yeah, look, the way I commute, it's not so easy in China." So they try to kind of it's clandestine. It's a covert propaganda. They do it not so openly. They say, "Look how difficult it is to commute. I'm so high," and then he shows how high the buildings are. And of course, if you watch it, you are impressed. You don't think, "Oh, it's difficult way to commute because he's so high." So that this is very subliminal propaganda. And then you see him with the train, with a modern train driving through a building, yeah, and then he arrives. Yeah, please go on. Sorry.
Yeah, but actually that clip is compared to the others was yeah, it was very subtle.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that one I'm not quite sure about it actually. That one looked almost genuine to me, or they have gotten better at it because he didn't mention Western media. Yeah, because usually like you just said, these clips figure that town Chongqing. It's always the same angle. They show the buildings. You need to show the one with the train and Hongyadong, another one which looks great at night and lots of LEDs. Blah, 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 blah. But then they will start telling you, we were so surprised because everything we've read in the Western media said it was horrible, it was dangerous, it was poor, and look how great it is. And yeah, that guy's clip didn't quite fit. So it's either
No,
it
I
was a
think it's
genuine
just
one,
it's
or
like
they've gotten,
you know, you said it, it's subtle. It's subtle, it's subliminal.
yeah.
And this is they mix between very open propaganda and
Mm.
with this in your face, yeah, Western media is lying to you. Look how great and look how ugly the New York subway is, or something like that. And then they mix it up with these
So
subtle
you've seen
videos
those. Mm.
because they produce so much content and it's like an advertisement. And this, there are Westerners and there are even Chinese influencers who do this. And I'm wondering, how could they publish on Instagram when it's blocked? How is it possible that they are not only watching hidden with a VPN, but publishers, because the government approves it and they want it. There's no other explanation for it.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, because you if you watched enough of these clips, uh, it's it's pretty easy to get a feeling for if they're genuine or not, because the phrase unlike the Western media, or the Western media told us blah blah blah, that has no place in a in a normal influence, in a normal travel video. It's like that simply wouldn't occur. Or would it occur to you to go to a nice place and then talk about Western
No, I
media?
would not. I
Probably
would
not.
not say. I would not say Western media. I would say maybe contradicting to the stereotype or something like that. But I would not say Western media. I think, yeah. So, I'm very politicized because of the what happened in the last 20 years. But now recently, yesterday, I saw a video of an influencer, travel influencer, who went to Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I go to the country that they consider the last dictatorship, and blah, 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 blah. And so this was the way how he started. And then he showed friendly people, cheap food, and that Minsk is so clean and so organized. Yeah? So first of all, Minsk is not a beautiful city. It's one of the most least impressive cities in the post-Soviet European space. So for instance, Kiev is much, much more beautiful. Minsk is like a Soviet nostalgia museum. Secondly, of course, he felt safe because he didn't do anything to the government. He was not a guy of the opposition who got jailed and in the torture chamber. Yeah, so he didn't mention that. Because when we say it's not safe, it doesn't mean that we say there are pickpockets going around or you get robbed. So they mix this and they do it all the time. They do it with all the countries. Of course, a dictatorship like Belarus on the street, walking on the street, it's true. It's maybe in some streets much safer than if you walk on the street in London. But the problem is, if it's about a political position and if they know you are opposition, then you got killed or beaten up or go to the torture chamber. And he didn't differentiate it in that. So, and on the end of the video, he said Belarus is safe. So, what is the message? So unfortunately, we were interrupted by a cyber attack. No, not really. But what I wanted to say with this Belarus video, well, I was also in Belarus in 2011, and people were extremely scared when I asked them about politics, when I asked them about the president, and when I wanted to make a picture of the KGB building, which is, by the way, still named KGB there. And the clean
Oh,
streets, they come for a price. That's for sure. But Friedrich, you want to say something about the clean streets?
yeah. That, of course, you have the same videos about China showing cleanliness. But not only that, and I think what is important is the Chinese propaganda targeted at Western audience always targets issues that exist in the West and are talked about, but the Chinese propaganda does it to like sow discord. For example, cleanliness is one example, but it's never China is clean and that's nice and that makes us happy. It's always in contrast to your cities, and then it's implied, which have been ruined by your politicians.
Mm.
Chinese cities are clean. Another big campaign was centered around racism. And it featured influencers from, I think they were mainly from Africa, one from England. I don't know. Anyway, people of color in China. And here the story arc was in contrast to the West. I've never experienced any racism in China. That's the first time I feel free as a Black person.
Yeah, I saw
That's a
some
big one.
some some
Another one
similar
is,
stories where the
yeah,
African Americans go there and they say it is not racism here. And you see the Chinese people, they come to them and want to take pictures and they find it very nice. Yeah. So they are just curious. Yeah. So it's obviously a campaign of I think I don't know what is the background of these people, but maybe with a very strong anti-Western sentiment, you can get some so distorted views of reality that you can really believe that Chinese is an anti-racist society.
it could be. It could be other incentives. I mean, I'm pretty sure some people who make these videos are genuine because they believe that stuff. No doubt about it. Others are probably paid directly, and yet others get some incentives. Like you get to travel to this nice resort in China, and we'll film a little video clip or something. So yeah, then another big one is infrastructure. In the West, it's crumbling, but here it's all shiny and new. And they are targeting the discourses which do happen in the West. So that's why it's
Especially in the United States, there is a big discussion about infrastructure that is not in a good shape. And
and
the
racism,
United
of
States
course.
and the United States is the main competitor of China, so it makes sense. But on the other hand, it doesn't justify the glorification of a dictatorship. But this is what they don't say, because the subliminal message is, with a government like ours, everything is in shape. And they show only their most beautiful corners. This is also something. Yeah. Does China
Yeah,
look like that everywhere? Question mark.
yeah, obviously not. They're
Mhm.
mostly in the first tier cities, but yeah, and also, I mean, another obvious point is like we don't deny that infrastructure is in a bad shape in places. We don't deny that there's racism in the West. We don't deny that there's homelessness
Mm.
and so on. So yeah.
I think it's interesting to see these videos where the influencers, they walk around and they show, look at this bridge, look how well this looks, and they build it up so fast, and look at these streets, how beautiful these streets are. And I remember when I started to travel Eastern European, former Soviet bloc countries, the people cared a lot about the shape of the streets. So basically, when there was a nice street, and if you leaving one country, entering another one, and you're driving with somebody from this country, he will say, oh my God, look at our street, how smooth and how bad this almost sand street was where we're coming from with all the holes. So it's a big deal. We don't, I think in the West, we don't usually don't think so much about it because we only care about the street when it's bad. Yeah, but we are not really proud when we have a good street. It's not such a big deal usually. Yeah, but it's in their mindset, in their propaganda. It comes from a very old playbook, I guess.
Yes, and I mean, in parts, it is also understandable because China has made lots of improvements in a very short time. But again, it's not a problem to admit this. So, but that from a Chinese perspective, yeah, I can not. There's lots of nationalist pride and also more harmless nationalist pride, which I think is genuine. I mean, but yeah, again, the things we are critical of in China are not a lack of good trains, a lack of clean cities. That's it's besides the point.
Not an issue at all. This would be maybe a touristic topic, but not anything about geopolitics.
Yeah.
There's one more
But
thing.
what I'm sorry, just to make clear what I mean, it's while we have to be, I think, very cautious about Chinese propaganda efforts, at the same time, especially, yeah, when you talk to Chinese people, we have, sometimes we have to dial it back a bit because, yeah, they're genuinely happy and proud about some of the progress they made.
Yes. So it's not that everybody is just playing a role. I mean, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, but of course these are things that are undeniable. But on the other hand, we have this geopolitical narrative, especially here in the West, by some sinologists or also political scientists who think they understand the world, and they say China, BRICS is the future, and they say slogans like the global South sees things different, especially if it's about the invasion of Ukraine, and China and everything is the future and the West is in decay and we should join BRICS. Yeah, they speak even about Germany or Austria. We should all better join BRICS, forget about the EU. And we see these kind of narratives on the far right, on the far left, and sometimes even a little bit in the center when social democrats speak about the so-called multilateralism world, where they actually mean multipolarism world. And we know what Lavrov means when he speaks about this. He means more power to the dictators and less to the Western democracies.
Yeah. I mean, what worries me is when you see politicians, business people present a view of China, which is a nicer version of the obvious propaganda, but it's still the exact same thing that Chinese state propaganda wants us to believe.
Yeah.
And that worries me because yeah, I've heard, I think you sent me this presentation a German politician, former politician, gave, where he talked about, I think it was in front of some business association. I
It
can't
was in
remember.
front
Anyway,
of a political party, Social Democratic Party, and they have their own China Friendship Association, because you have to know we have, I think, 10 or something. Maybe in the
yeah,
German-speaking world we have 100 China Friendship Associations, and all are heavily connected to, and they have ambassadors there, Chinese ambassadors visiting, so they don't even hide
yeah.
connect.
And exactly. And the things he said, again, I don't know if he really believes it or whatever, but it was, to my ears, it was a nicer version of Chinese state propaganda with the same talking points, but made so that they sound really nice
And subtle,
to
more
our
subtle.
ears. And yeah, you would like,
And between the lines.
when he said something like, maybe us Germans, we should not be so quick to criticize, because look at our recent history,
Mm-hmm.
and we should not be so quick to criticize because China is such an old country. And maybe the influence of Taoism and Buddhism and Confucianism is also worth considering. And maybe the model they have based on their very old civilization uh, is should not be easily criticized.
Yeah, and
That
then
was the gist of what he said.
yeah, this is so dangerous because this is so confusing, and you mean, yeah, it makes sense, but then you need to remind, yeah, Uyghurs, one party dictatorship system, no freedom of speech, supporting Russia, having a close military alliance with Russia. This is like every time somebody works with such narratives, I think, okay, let's make a reality check, talk about reality, not these kinds of phrases that are based on some mythological but it works. Yeah, it works because it sounds like it makes sense, and I can really feel the audiences that say, yeah, we should, who are we to judge, and every coin has two sides and the truth lies in the middle, and both sides need to, and we need to have a dialogue. Yeah, of course we need to have a dialogue. We can have a dialogue, but we need to understand what our opposite is thinking and doing. Yeah.
Yes, and most Chinese people do not go about their day thinking about Confucius and Taoism and Buddhism. I mean, they're just regular people who think about putting food on the table, hopefully having a relaxing evening, and making ends meet. That's what most people are concerned with. And they're not different in that way. There is no mystical extra layer on top of it. And yeah, not. I mean, I remember I was in China once, and that was in a business function, and one of the people who was with us, also German, he asked our Chinese counterparts to explain to him what the stars, the small stars on the Chinese flag mean. And it was a horrible moment because everybody was embarrassed because they, they didn't know. They didn't know, they didn't care so much. I'm sure they've learned it in school, but and then they called somebody who knew, and yeah, it was
Oh my God, that's awful. I love such
yeah.
situations. This is reminds me when somebody asks me about Austrian geography. Austria is such a small country, and they ask me where some town is in which state, and I have no clue actually, but I think it's far away. It's not Vienna for sure. So thank you very much, Friedrich Binder. I'm very grateful that you are part of our contacts at the Disinfo Resilience Network, and looking forward to talk to you again about about future developments in the China world relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.